A waitress paid for an old man's coffee without knowing he was a billionaire testing his heirs. At the edge of a forgotten highway, a weary young woman traded her last coins for quiet empathy. But that coffee was a hidden test that would change everything. A gray morning shrouded Route 70 as Tessa wiped down the counter of Miller's Diner for the third time that hour. The small roadside cafe stood lonely against the misty horizon, its neon sign flickering feebly as rain threatened from heavy clouds. "Table 4 needs a refill," called Martha, the owner's wife, her voice raspy from years of cigarettes. Tessa nodded, tucking a strand of brown hair behind her ear. Dark circles shadowed her eyes as she mentally calculated this month's bills. Rent was due Friday. Mom's medication had gone up again. Christmas was coming, and she had nothing saved for the kids. The bell above the door jingled as two men in tailored suits entered, briefcases in hand. They chose the corner booth, the one Tessa had just cleaned. "Is this really the only place to eat for 50 miles?" one muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "Better than starving," the other replied, eyeing the stained ceiling. "Though not by much." Tessa approached with a practiced smile. "Coffee while you decide." "Is it fresh?" the first man asked, not looking up from his phone. "Just made it," she lied, pouring the hour-old brew. The door chimed again. An elderly man shuffled in, wearing tattered clothes that hung from his thin frame. His gray beard was unkempt, his shoes held together by duct tape. The businessman visibly recoiled as he passed their table. "Jesus, doesn't this place have standards?" one whispered to his companion. "Smells like he hasn't showered in weeks." The old man sat at the counter, shoulders hunched. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he studied the menu. "Just black coffee," he said softly when Tessa approached. "No sugar." She nodded, noticing how he carefully counted coins from a small plastic bag. She saw immediately he didn't have enough. The suited men snickered. "Probably blew his Social Security on booze," one murmured. Anger flashed through Tessa, but she kept her face neutral. She poured the coffee, then slid it toward him with a smile. "On the house today," she said. "I can pay," he insisted, pride in his voice despite his appearance. "Next time," she replied, already turning away. She felt him watching her as she served the businessmen their eggs and toast. When she returned to the counter, the old man had finished his coffee. "Thank you," he said, his voice suddenly clearer, his eyes meeting hers directly for the first time. "For seeing past my rags." Something in his gaze made her pause. Wisdom, perhaps, or kindness. She couldn't quite place it. "Everyone deserves a little kindness," she replied. He nodded once, then shuffled back into the rain. Tessa watched him go, then turned to clear his cup. Beneath it lay a 50-cent tip, probably all he could afford. She slipped the coins into her pocket, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. "You shouldn't encourage them," Martha said, appearing beside her. "Bad for business." Tessa shrugged. He was just an old man who wanted coffee. She had no way of knowing that those few minutes, that single cup of coffee, would change everything. That the old man in dirty clothes would return to her life in ways she couldn't imagine. Or that her small act of kindness would set in motion events that would reveal secrets buried for decades. As she wiped down the counter again, the 50 cents heavy in her pocket, Tessa had no idea that someone had finally seen her too. The apartment building loomed gray against the twilight sky as Tessa climbed the crumbling steps. 3 flights up, dragging feet that had stood for 12 hours straight. The elevator had been broken since August. The landlord kept promising to fix it next week. She unlocked the door quietly, hoping Mom might be asleep. No such luck. "That you, Tessie?" Her mother's voice, once strong and capable, now wavered with confusion. "It's me, Mom." She set down her purse and shrugged off her wet coat. The small living room was dimly lit by a single lamp. Ida Moore sat in her recliner, oxygen tubes in her nostrils, a tattered Afghan across her lap. Once a respected nurse at County General, now Alzheimer's was slowly erasing her, piece by piece. "You're late," Ida said, coughing harshly. "Double shift." Tessa kissed her mother's forehead. "Where are the kids?" "Mrs. Peterson took them for dinner. Said they were hungry." Shame burned in Tessa's chest. The neighbor was kind but couldn't afford to feed 3 extra mouths. As if summoned by their mention, the apartment door burst open. 8-year-old Emma raced in first, followed by 11-year-old James and 5-year-old Tyler. "Mommy!" Tyler launched himself at her legs. "Hey, buddy!" She hugged him, breathing in his little boy scent of dirt and cheap shampoo. "Mrs. Peterson made spaghetti," Emma announced, "and garlic bread." That was nice of her. Tessa made a mental note to repay their neighbor somehow. James hung back, eyes too serious for a child. "There's no food in the fridge again." "I'll go shopping tomorrow," Tessa promised. "Tonight we can make rice and eggs." "Again?" Emma's face fell. "Will we have Christmas this year?" Tyler asked innocently. "Bobby at school says Santa brings iPads." Tessa swallowed hard. "Santa brings different things to different kids." "Because we're poor?" James asked bluntly. Before she could answer, Ida began coughing violently. Tessa rushed to her side, holding a tissue to her mouth. It came away spotted with blood. "Mom, did you take your medicine today?" Ida looked confused. "What medicine?" Exhaustion threatened to overwhelm Tessa as she helped her mother to bed, then made the kids simple dinner. While they ate, she sorted through bills by the dim kitchen light. The electricity notice was printed in red. Final warning. 3 years ago, she'd been halfway through her nursing program when Mom's diagnosis came. Then Dad left, unable to handle his wife's decline. Then came the custody battle for the kids. Tessa dropped everything to become the family's sole support. Now she worked 2 jobs, the diner by day, cleaning offices by night. She was invisible to the world. Just another struggling single mother, another statistic. Later, after tucking in the children, she stood under the shower's lukewarm spray, finally allowing herself to cry. The water masked her tears as she remembered her former classmates, now graduated and starting careers. She thought of the snide comments from the businessman at the diner, the way the doctor had rushed her mother through her last appointment. Nobody saw Tessa Moore. Nobody recognized her struggles or her sacrifices. She was just scraping by, invisible in a world that valued only success and money. As she finally crawled into bed beside her sleeping mother, listening to her labored breathing, Tessa whispered a prayer into the darkness. "Just a little help. That's all I'm asking." She couldn't know that across town in a penthouse overlooking the city lights, the old man from the diner sat at a massive desk, writing her name in careful script on a document that would change her life forever. 3 days later, Martha waved a cream-colored envelope at Tessa as she tied on her apron. "This came for you. Fancy." Tessa took it, puzzled. Nobody sent actual letters anymore, especially not on heavy stationery with embossed lettering. The return address read, "Grant and Associates, Attorneys at Law, New York City." "You being sued?" Martha asked, nosily peering over Tessa's shoulder. "Not that I know of." She slid her finger under the flap. Inside was a formal letter requesting her presence at the Manhattan offices of Grant and Associates regarding a matter of significant importance. It was signed by Patrick Grant, senior partner, and included a phone number. "Has to be a mistake," Tessa said, shoving it into her pocket. Throughout her shift, the letter burned like a hot coal. During her break, she finally called the number, expecting a scam or wrong number. A crisp female voice answered. "Grant and Associates." "I received a letter," Tessa began hesitantly. "Name, please?" "Tessa Moore." "One moment." There was a pause. "Yes, Ms. Moore. Mr. Grant is expecting you tomorrow at 2 p.m. There must be some mistake. I don't know any lawyers in New York." "I assure you there's no mistake. The car will pick you up at 10 a.m. "Car? I can't just leave. I have kids, a mother who needs care." All arrangements have been made for your family's care during your absence. This is regarding the estate of Benjamin Foster. The name meant nothing to Tessa. I'm sorry. Who? Mr. Grant will explain everything tomorrow. The car will arrive at 10. The line went dead. That night, Tessa paced her tiny kitchen, the letter crumpled in her hand. You should go, Ida said during a moment of startling clarity. Her mother had fewer and fewer of these periods of lucency. It's crazy, Mom. I can't just get in some stranger's car and go to New York. Sometimes, Ida said, her eyes suddenly clear and present. God whispers to us in strange ways. Listen when he does. I can't afford. Teresa Ann Moore, you've sacrificed everything for us. Maybe this is your blessing finally coming. The next morning, Tessa stood on the curb at 10 a.m. sharp, wearing her only decent outfit, a navy blue dress she'd worn to her cousin's wedding 3 years ago. It hung loose on her frame now. A black Lincoln pulled up exactly on time. The driver, a man in a dark suit, opened the door without speaking. 6 hours later, the car glided to a stop before a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. Tessa stepped out, feeling small and shabby against the towering glass edifice. In the lobby, the security guard looked her up and down skeptically when she mentioned Grant and Associates. You have an appointment? His tone suggested this was highly unlikely. Tessa Moore for Patrick Grant at 2. He checked his screen, eyebrows rising. 63rd floor. The elevator whisked her upward, her stomach dropping with the rapid ascent. The doors opened onto a reception area of marble and glass, where a sleek blonde woman sat behind a desk that probably cost more than Tessa's yearly salary. Ms. Moore? The receptionist's smile didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Grant is waiting. She led Tessa down a hallway, lined with oil paintings to massive wooden doors, which opened to reveal a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. A tall man with silver-streaked hair stood as she entered. Ms. Moore, Patrick Grant. Please sit. Tessa perched on the edge of a leather chair. Why am I here? You served coffee to an elderly gentleman at Miller's Diner 4 days ago. She blinked. I serve coffee to lots of people. This particular gentleman was somewhat disheveled. You paid for his coffee. The old man in dirty clothes. How do you know about that? Grant sat behind his desk, steepling his fingers. Because that man was Benjamin Foster. The name still meant nothing to her. Benjamin Foster, Grant continued, was worth $8 billion. Tessa felt the room tilt slightly. Was? She managed to ask. He died yesterday morning. Grant slid a photograph across the desk. It showed a distinguished elderly man in an expensive suit at some gala event. That's not him, Tessa said automatically. It is, Grant confirmed. Mr. Foster had recently taken to disguising himself. Testing people, you might say. I don't understand. His final instruction was quite specific. Grant picked up a piece of paper and read aloud. Give everything to the waitress. She saw me when no one else did. She'll know what to do. Everything? Tessa whispered, the room spinning around her. Everything, Grant confirmed, opening a drawer. He removed a small wooden box, locked with a tiny brass key, and placed it before her. Benjamin Foster has made you his heir. This can't be right, Tessa said, staring at the small wooden box. People don't just leave fortunes to strangers. Patrick Grant's expression remained impassive. I assure you, Ms. Moore, this is absolutely correct. Benjamin Foster was, he paused, an unusual man. So what happens now? Do I sign something? Get a check? The words felt surreal leaving her mouth. It's not quite that simple. Grant unlocked the box with a small key. Mr. Foster's instructions were specific. Tessa leaned forward expectantly as the lid opened. Inside was not a check or documents, but a leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope. That's it? She asked, confused. A book? Not just any book. This is Benjamin Foster's personal diary. Grant handed her the envelope. And this contains his final message to you. Tessa opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper with elegant handwriting. The money is meaningless. The truth is everything. You saw me. Now help them see us all. I don't understand. Neither do I, Grant admitted, surprising her. But Mr. Foster was very clear that you would understand when the time was right. But the inheritance, the money, the bulk of Mr. Foster's financial assets will go to his sister Claire, as stipulated in an earlier will. What he left you is different. A diary? Disappointment and confusion warred in Tessa's mind. For one wild moment she'd imagined paying off her mother's medical bills, buying a proper home for her children. She opened the journal, finding page after page of what appeared to be nonsensical symbols and codes. I can't even read this. Mr. Foster was paranoid about privacy in his later years, Grant explained. He developed his own cipher system. You're telling me a billionaire tracked me down to give me his coded diary? Tessa felt angry suddenly. Is this some kind of sick joke? Mr. Foster spent his final months testing people, Grant said quietly. He would disguise himself as homeless, as a janitor, as a patient in his own hospitals. He wanted to see who would treat him with dignity when they thought he had nothing. And I passed his test by giving him free coffee? Tessa said skeptically. You were the only one who did. Something flickered in Grant's eyes. Sadness, perhaps. In 3 months of trying. Tessa stared at the diary, reality crashing down around her. I can't take this. I don't want it. I'm afraid it's not optional. The media already knows someone outside the Foster family has received something in the will. They just don't know who yet. The media? Benjamin Foster was one of the wealthiest men in America. His death is major news. His will is public record. As if on cue, Grant's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowning. It appears someone has leaked your name. There are reporters at your home in Arkansas already. Panic rose in Tessa's throat. My kids, my mother, they're safe. I've arranged security, but you need to understand, Ms. Moore. Claire Foster is already contesting the will. She wants that diary. She can have it. I don't want any part of this. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Benjamin was explicit that the diary goes to you, and you alone. He said you'd understand why when you read it. Tessa felt trapped. But I can't even decode it. Grant handed her a small USB drive. This might help. Benjamin left it with specific instructions that it be given to you along with the diary. A sharp knock interrupted them. Grant's assistant entered, her composed expression now anxious. Ms. Foster is here. She's demanding to see you. Grant straightened his tie. Tell her I'll be right out. He turned to Tessa. We need to get you back to Arkansas before she sees you. My assistant will take you down the service elevator. But, Ms. Moore, I don't think you understand. Claire Foster is not someone you want to cross. If she discovers you have the diary before you've had time to understand what you're dealing with. He left the sentence unfinished. As Grant's assistant hurried her toward a hidden door, Tessa clutched the wooden box to her chest. Why would he do this to me? She asked, half to herself. Grant's expression softened slightly. Benjamin Foster wasn't cruel, Ms. Moore. Quite the opposite. If he chose you, he had his reasons. In the service elevator, Tessa's mind raced. This morning, she'd been a struggling waitress. Now she held a dead billionaire's secrets, and had apparently made a powerful enemy. As the car sped her back toward Arkansas, she opened the journal again, staring at the unintelligible symbols. Whatever secrets it held had been worth billions to Benjamin Foster. What would they cost her? The library smelled of dust and forgotten paper. Tessa sat across from Harold Jenkins, the town's retired librarian, watching as he examined the diary through thick glasses. Fascinating, he murmured, running a finger over the strange symbols. Not any cipher I recognize immediately. It had been 3 days since her return from New York. 3 days of reporters camped outside her apartment building. 3 days of whispers following her through town. 3 days of her children asking questions she couldn't answer. "Can you decode it?" Tessa asked, glancing nervously at the library windows. She'd snuck in through the back entrance to avoid being seen. "Perhaps, with time." Harold looked up. "May I ask how you came to possess such an unusual document?" Tessa hesitated. "It belonged to someone who wanted me to have it." "Benjamin Foster," Harold said, confirming her fears that everyone knew. "It's all over the news." She nodded reluctantly. "Extraordinary man," Harold continued, returning to the diary. "Self-made billionaire. No formal education beyond high school. Appeared out of nowhere in his 20s and built an empire." Appeared from nowhere. His background was always mysterious. The official story was that he was a distant cousin of the Foster family who inherited a small sum and parlayed it into billions. Harold's eyes twinkled. "But small towns run on gossip, my dear, and I've been around long enough to remember when certain rumors don't add up." Tessa leaned forward. "What rumors?" The Fosters were old money. Shipping, railroads, then oil. But they had scandals like any wealthy family. Madeline Foster, Claire's mother, had a reputation for discretion issues with household staff. "You think Benjamin was—" "I think," Harold said carefully, "that this diary might contain information certain people wouldn't want public." He tapped the USB drive Tessa had brought. "Let's see what's on this, shall we?" Harold's ancient computer whirred to life. The drive contained a single file, a simple text document with rows of symbols and their alphabetic equivalents. "A cipher key," Harold breathed. "He's made it simple for you." For the next hour, they painstakingly translated the first pages. Benjamin's elegant handwriting emerged from the code. "I was born in darkness, the son of a maid and a married man. My mother cleaned their toilets while pregnant with me. They kept me hidden in the servants' quarters for 16 years. A shameful secret." Claire knew. She was older. She would come to the cottage when no one was watching. "You're not really a Foster," she would say. "You're nothing." Then she would make me prove my gratitude for the roof over my head. Tessa covered her mouth, the implications clear. "I ran away at 16 with $50 stolen from Richard Foster's coat pocket. I swore I would return someday as their equal. I would make them see me. The irony. I became richer than all of them combined. I bought their company. I saved them from bankruptcy. And still, I remained invisible. The charity case. The bastard son they refused to acknowledge. Claire married into more money, had perfect children. But she never stopped fearing I would tell the truth. That people would know the great Fosters had hidden their shame in plain sight for decades. The diary detailed systematic abuse, cover-ups, and the family's efforts to erase Benjamin from their history as he grew more successful than they ever were. "My God," Tessa whispered as they reached a particularly disturbing passage about Claire's efforts to discredit him. "You understand now," Harold said quietly, "why she doesn't want this diary public. But why give it to me? I'm nobody." "Perhaps that's exactly why. You saw him when he was disguised as nobody." Tessa remembered the old man's eyes when she'd given him the coffee. "Thank you for seeing past my rags." She'd thought he meant his clothes. Now she understood he meant his entire life. "What do I do with this?" she asked. "That, my dear, is entirely up to you." Harold closed the diary carefully. "But remember, knowledge is power, and power makes you a target." As if on cue, Tessa's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about the diary. Your children's school. Tomorrow, noon." Tessa's blood ran cold. "Someone's threatening my kids." Harold's face darkened. "The Fosters have always protected their secrets. At any cost." "I never asked for this," Tessa said, her voice breaking. "Few of us ask for our purpose," Harold replied, placing the diary back in her hands. "But when it finds us, we must decide. Will we hide from it? Or will we rise to meet it?" Outside the library, the setting sun cast long shadows across the street. Tessa clutched the diary to her chest, feeling its weight, Not just of paper and leather, but of truth and consequence. She'd been invisible her entire life. Now, she had been seen, and in turn, she held the power to make others seen too. But at what cost to those she loved most? Tessa's heart hammered as she approached her children's school the next day at noon. The playground was empty, the children inside for lunch. She clutched her phone, thumb hovering over 911. A black Lincoln, identical to the one that had taken her to New York, idled near the fence. The back door opened. A woman stepped out, tall and elegant in a camel coat that probably cost more than Tessa's yearly salary. Her ash-blonde hair was swept into a perfect chignon, her makeup flawless, but her eyes were cold. "Ms. Moore." Her voice was like ice wrapped in silk. "Claire Foster, I believe you have something of mine." Tessa's throat went dry. "The diary belongs to me. Legally." Claire's perfect smile didn't reach her eyes. "Let's not pretend you understand what you're involved in. Benjamin was unwell in his final months, delusional, paranoid. He seemed perfectly sane to me." "You spoke to him for what, 2 minutes while serving coffee?" Claire stepped closer. "I knew him his entire life." "Did you?" Tessa asked quietly, thinking of the diary entries. "Or did you just want to control him his entire life?" Something dangerous flashed in Claire's eyes. "Careful, Ms. Moore. You're a single mother with 3 children and an ailing parent. Your life is precarious." The threat hung in the air between them. "Are you threatening me? I'm offering you an opportunity." Claire opened her designer handbag, removed an envelope. $500,000, cash, tax-free, in exchange for the diary and your silence. The amount was staggering, enough to pay off her mother's medical bills, send her kids to college, buy a modest home. "And if I refuse? Then things become unpleasant." Claire glanced toward the school. Children are so vulnerable, aren't they? Schools have become dangerous places, and medical care for the elderly, so easily compromised. Rage surged through Tessa. "You wouldn't. The Foster family has protected its reputation for 6 generations, Ms. Moore. What do you think?" Before Tessa could respond, another car pulled up. Patrick Grant stepped out, his expression grim. "That's enough, Claire," he said firmly. Claire's face hardened. "You're supposed to be my lawyer, Patrick. I'm the executor of Benjamin's will. My duty is to him, not you." "Has he told you what's in that diary?" Claire asked Tessa, her composure cracking slightly. "The lies Benjamin wrote about our family?" "Is it lies?" Tessa asked. "Or just truths you don't want known?" Claire's elegant features contorted with fury. "You pathetic little waitress. You have no idea what you're dealing with. By this time next week, you'll wish you'd never served him that coffee." She stormed back to her car, which pulled away with a squeal of tires. "Are you all right?" Patrick asked Tessa. She was shaking. "She threatened my children. I was afraid of this." He looked genuinely concerned. "You need to understand, Ms. Moore. Claire Foster has powerful connections, judges, politicians, media executives. What does she think I'm going to do? Go on Oprah with the diary? Possibly. The contents would certainly make headlines. All I want is to be left alone," Tessa said desperately. "I don't think that's an option anymore." Patrick hesitated. "There's something I haven't told you. Something Benjamin wanted kept secret until the right moment." He handed her a small business card. "This woman is a journalist, independent, fearless. Benjamin trusted her. If things get worse, call her." When Tessa returned home, she found her apartment door ajar. Heart in her throat, she rushed inside. The place had been ransacked, drawers emptied, furniture slashed. On her bedroom wall, spray painted in red, "Where is it?" Her phone rang. The school. James had been in a fight. 3 older boys had called him trailer trash and said his mother was a gold digger. His left arm was broken. That night, after the police reports in the emergency room and getting the kids settled at a motel, Tessa sat alone in the bathroom, crying silently. Her boss had fired her. Too much drama, he said. The landlord had called. Other tenants were complaining about the media attention. She pulled out the diary, tempted to burn it, to give it to Claire, to make this nightmare end. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, with an attachment. It was an audio file. She pressed play, and a man's voice, cultured, elderly, but strong, filled the bathroom. My name is Benjamin Foster. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. But my story, our story, deserves to be told. Not for vengeance. For justice. For all the invisible ones. Tessa closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. What do you want from me? She whispered to the empty room. As if in answer, her mother's voice drifted from her memory. Sometimes God whispers to us in strange ways. Listen when he does. Tessa wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and made a decision. She would no longer be invisible. Rain lashed against the windows of the small motel room. Tessa sat cross-legged on the bed, her laptop open before her, the diary beside it. In the adjoining room, her children and mother slept, exhausted from their hasty relocation. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What she was about to do couldn't be undone. Be brave, she whispered to herself and pressed record. My name is Tessa Moore, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. 8 days ago, I served coffee to a man I thought was homeless. Today, I'm telling his story, our story. For the next hour, she read selected passages from the diary, careful to omit anything that could be considered legally damaging. She included Benjamin's descriptions of growing up invisible, of building his empire from nothing, of returning to find that money couldn't buy acceptance from a family determined to deny his existence. She concluded with the audio clip Benjamin had left, his clear voice asking for truth, not vengeance. At 3 a.m., she uploaded the video to an anonymous account on a public forum and went to sleep. By noon, the video had 10,000 views. By evening, 500,000. Tessa's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, talk shows, publishers. She ignored them all, focusing on keeping her family safe in their temporary sanctuary. 3 days later, a knock came at the motel door. Tessa peered through the peephole to see Patrick Grant, looking harried. You've caused quite a stir, he said when she let him in. I didn't mean to. I just wanted Claire to back off. Well, she's backed off, into her Hamptons estate with her phone disconnected. He placed a small flash drive on the table. Benjamin left this with instructions to give it to you once the diary became public. More secrets? No. His voice. Hours of personal recordings detailing everything. Tessa's hand trembled as she reached for it. Why didn't you give me this before? Benjamin's instructions were specific. He wanted you to choose to tell his story on your own first, to prove you understood what was at stake. And now? Now it's up to you. That night, Tessa listened to Benjamin's recordings. His voice, sometimes angry, sometimes sad, occasionally even amused, recounted a lifetime of being erased by his own family. The next morning, her phone rang with an unknown number. Tessa Moore, a woman's crisp voice. Maya Richardson, investigative journalist. Patrick Grant said you might call. I didn't. No. But you've started something that can't be stopped. Maya's voice softened. I've been investigating the Foster family for years. Benjamin was going to be my source before he died. What do you want from me? Benjamin's voice deserves to be heard, not just snippets online, the full story. Claire Foster has already threatened my children once. I have resources, protection, and a platform Claire can't shut down. Tessa thought of her son's broken arm, of her mother's worsening cough, of the $500,000 she'd turned down. If I do this, will it ever end? Truth has a way of setting everyone free, Maya replied, even those who fight it hardest. 2 weeks later, Tessa sat in a downtown courtroom, facing Claire Foster across a polished table. Claire's battery of lawyers flanked her like armored guards. This lawsuit is frivolous, Maya's attorney stated flatly. Ms. Moore has broken no laws by reading from a diary legally bequeathed to her. The diary contains libelous claims against my client, Claire's lead attorney countered. The diary contains Mr. Foster's personal recollections, which he had every right to document, Maya's lawyer replied. Furthermore, we have this. He played one of Benjamin's recordings, one specifically addressing the legal right to share his story. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened impassively. When the recording ended, she removed her glasses. Ms. Foster, your request for a gag order is denied. The First Amendment exists precisely for cases like this. She looked directly at Tessa. Ms. Moore, while you have the legal right to share the diary's contents, I strongly advise considering the human impact of your actions. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Tessa kept her head down until Maya guided her to a waiting car. We won, Maya said as they pulled away. It doesn't feel like winning. It rarely does when you're fighting for truth. Maya squeezed her hand. But it matters, Tessa. You've already received hundreds of messages from people who felt invisible their whole lives. People who see themselves in this story. Tessa thought of the emails and letters that had somehow found their way to her, from service workers, from children of fractured families, from people who had been erased and silenced. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, Maya said, we let Benjamin's voice be heard. All of it. That night, as her children slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Tessa watched the initial segment of Maya's documentary air nationwide. On screen, Benjamin Foster's distinguished face filled the frame, his eyes clear and determined. I spent my life fighting to be seen. What I learned too late is that being seen isn't about wealth or power, it's about truth. And sometimes, truth needs a messenger who understands what it means to be invisible. As the segment ended, Tessa's phone lit up with a text from Patrick Grant. He chose well. For the first time since this began, Tessa felt something like peace. The invisible had become visible, and somewhere, she thought, Benjamin Foster was finally being seen. $2 million, Ms. Moore. Final offer. Randall Stevens, CEO of Pinnacle Publishing, leaned back in his chair, confident smile firmly in place. Across the table, Maya Richardson raised an eyebrow at Tessa, waiting for her response. The sleek conference room on the 40th floor of Manhattan's Pinnacle Tower offered breathtaking views of Central Park. 3 weeks ago, Tessa would have been cleaning offices like this one at night. Now she was being offered millions for her story. And what exactly would you want for $2 million, Mr. Stevens? Tessa asked quietly. Exclusive rights to the diary, the recordings, your personal story, everything. His smile widened. We'll make it a major release. Book tour, morning shows, speaking engagements. You'll be set for life. Tessa thought of her children staying with a neighbor while she flew to New York for this meeting, of her mother's worsening condition, of the medical bills piling up. And what happens to Benjamin's story? She asked. Stevens waved dismissively. We'll shape it into something marketable. Focus on the rags to riches angle, the secret heir narrative. Readers eat that stuff up. And the truth about the Foster family? The people Benjamin wanted to give voice to? Stevens exchanged glances with his legal team. We'd need to sanitize certain elements, for liability reasons. Tessa stood up, straightening her simple black dress, purchased yesterday at a department store because she had nothing suitable for this meeting. No. The word hung in the air. Stevens blinked, clearly unaccustomed to rejection. I'm sorry? I said no. Tessa's voice grew stronger. Benjamin didn't give me his diary to make money. He gave it to me to tell the truth. Ms. Moore. Stevens's tone hardened. Be reasonable. You have children to support. Yes, I do. And I need to show them that some things matter more than money. She gathered her purse. Thank you for your time. In the elevator down, Maya squeezed her arm. You just walked away from $2 million. It wasn't mine to sell. Tessa's heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. Benjamin's story belongs to everyone who's ever been invisible. The next morning, Tessa received a call from a small independent publisher known for social justice work. Their offer was modest, but came with a promise. Benjamin's story would be told truthfully, in full, with proceeds directed to a foundation for literacy programs in underserved communities. That's it, Tessa told Maya. That's what Benjamin would have wanted. 3 months later, The Invisible Heir, Benjamin Foster's Hidden Truth, was published. The book became an overnight sensation, its raw honesty striking a chord with readers nationwide. On the day of the book's release, Tessa sat beside her mother's hospital bed, reading aloud from the first chapter. Ida's health had declined rapidly, but her mind had cleared in her final days. What doctors called terminal lucidity. "You did it, baby girl," Ida whispered, her voice frail but proud. "You stood your ground." "I learned from the best," Tessa replied, holding her mother's thin hand. Ida smiled weakly. "No, you were always the strong one." She closed her eyes. "I'm so tired, Tessie." "Then rest, Mom. I'll be right here." That night, as Benjamin Foster's voice played softly from the radio by her bed, part of an NPR special on his life, Ida Moore took her final breath. Tessa held her mother's hand as she slipped away, grateful that Ida had lived to see her daughter stand tall. At the funeral, attended by far more people than Tessa expected, James stood beside his mother at the podium. "My grandmother taught us that people matter more than things," the 11-year-old said, his voice steady despite his grief. "She was a nurse who helped everyone, even when she got sick herself. Mom says that's what real wealth looks like." 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the Literacy Foundation announcing that 10 rural schools would receive libraries named in honor of Ida Moore, former nurse and lifelong advocate for education. Claire Foster had disappeared from public life. The Foster Corporation issued a terse statement acknowledging Benjamin Foster's complicated relationship with the family, while announcing a major donation to foster care programs nationwide. With her portion of the book proceeds, modest compared to what Pinnacle had offered, Tessa purchased a small 3-bedroom house with a yard where her children could play safely. No mansion, no luxury cars, no extravagant lifestyle. Just enough. Stability, security. One evening, as she helped Emma with homework at their new kitchen table, Tyler asked innocently, "Mommy, are we rich now?" Tessa smiled. "No, honey, we're just okay. And that's enough." James looked up from his book. "But you could have been rich, right? Mrs. Peterson said you turned down millions of dollars." "I did," Tessa acknowledged. "Why?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. Tessa considered the question carefully. "Because some gifts aren't meant to make us rich. They're meant to make us free." James nodded slowly, understanding beyond his years. "Like Mr. Foster. He had all that money but wasn't free until you told his story." "Exactly." Tessa ruffled his hair. "Now finish your homework. We have a busy day tomorrow." That night, after tucking the children into beds they didn't have to share for the first time in their lives, Tessa sat on her small back porch, looking at the stars. In her hands, she held Benjamin's diary, now empty of secrets, its purpose fulfilled. She had been offered reality shows, speaking tours, ghost-written memoirs about her rags-to-riches story. She had declined them all. Some stories weren't meant to make you famous. Some were just meant to make you free. 6 months after the book's publication, Tessa drove down Route 70, the familiar stretch of highway now strange after so much had changed. Fall leaves swirled across the asphalt as she pulled into the gravel parking lot of Miller's Diner. The windows were dark, the neon open sign unlit. A weathered for sale sign hung crookedly on the door. The business had failed shortly after Tessa's firing, partly from the scandal that briefly surrounded her, partly from the general decline that had been happening for years. Martha and her husband had moved to Florida, she'd heard. Tessa sat in her car, remembering the first time she'd seen Benjamin Foster shuffle through that door. How different would her life be if she'd been busy with another customer, if she'd ignored him like everyone else did. Finally, she stepped out of the car. Using the spare key Martha had grudgingly mailed her to collect her final paycheck, she unlocked the side door. The smell hit her first, dust and disuse, with lingering notes of old grease and coffee. Chairs were stacked on tables. The counter where she'd stood for countless hours was bare, the ancient cash register gone. Tessa walked slowly through the abandoned space, memories flooding back. Here was where she'd taken orders day after day, scraping by on tips. Here was where the businessmen had mocked the cafe's shabbiness. Here was where she'd poured that fateful cup of coffee. In the dim light filtering through dusty windows, something caught her eye. A coffee mug lay on its side beneath the counter, somehow overlooked in the clearing out. She picked it up. It was chipped along the rim. "The same one," she whispered, recognizing it as the mug she'd served to Benjamin. The sound of tires on gravel made her turn. Through the window, she saw Patrick Grant's sleek car pull up beside hers. She hadn't spoken to him in nearly 2 months. When he entered, his tall frame seemed out of place in the humble diner. "How did you know I'd be here?" Tessa asked. "I didn't. I was coming to meet the realtor." Patrick held up a file folder. "But I'm glad I found you first." "Realtor," he nodded. "Benjamin had one final instruction that was time-delayed. I couldn't execute it until 6 months after the book's publication." He opened the folder and removed a document, handing it to her. Tessa read it, then read it again, certain she'd misunderstood. "This is a deed." "Yes, to this property." "Benjamin purchased it 3 days after meeting you here." Patrick's expression softened slightly. "He left it to you." "But why?" His note said, "Where it began." Patrick shrugged. "That's all." Tessa walked to the window, looking out at the empty parking lot, the faded sign, the weathered building. "What am I supposed to do with a failed diner?" "Whatever you want. Sell it. Reopen it. Tear it down." Patrick straightened his tie. "It's yours. No conditions." After he left, Tessa stood alone in the empty diner, the deed in one hand, the chipped mug in the other. She thought of all the hours she'd spent here, invisible to most customers, just another struggling waitress. She thought of Benjamin, invisible his entire life, despite his billions. She thought of her mother, whose life of service had gone largely unrecognized until after her death. 3 weeks later, the "for sale" sign came down. Workers arrived to clean, repair, paint. But no new restaurant equipment was delivered. Instead, bookshelves, tables and chairs, but arranged differently, comfortable reading nooks, a children's corner with bright cushions, a coffee station, that stayed. On a crisp December morning, the building reopened. The sign above the door read simply, "Scene, a community library." No admission fee, no library cards, just books, freely available to anyone who walked in. A place where stories could be shared, where people's voices could be heard. Tessa stood at the counter, now a checkout desk, as the first visitors trickled in. Mostly curious locals, wondering what had replaced the old diner. An elderly woman approached, her eyes taking in the transformation. "I've lived in this town 40 years, she said. "Never had a library before." "Well, you do now," Tessa replied, smiling. "What made you think of this?" Tessa considered the question, then answered truthfully, "Someone once saw me when no one else did. I thought it was time to return the favor." Throughout that first day, people came and went. Some borrowed books, some just sat reading, some shared stories of their own. A trucker passing through found a novel he'd been meaning to read. A young mother discovered a quiet space where her toddler could look at picture books. As evening fell, Tessa prepared to close up. The door chimed as one last visitor entered. A young man, perhaps 19, his clothes worn but clean, his expression hesitant. "Are you still open?" he asked, lingering by the door. "For a few more minutes." Tessa smiled. "Can I help you find something?" I don't really read much," he admitted. "But someone at the shelter said you had books anyone could take." We do. Tessa came around the counter. What interests you? He shrugged, embarrassed. Never thought about it. Never had books growing up. Tessa remembered Benjamin's words from the diary. Books were my escape, the only place I wasn't invisible. How about a cup of coffee while you look around? She offered. His eyes darted to the small coffee station. I don't have money for… It's free, Tessa said. Everything here is. She poured him a cup in the chipped mug, Benjamin's mug, and watched as he tentatively made his way to a shelf. No one had seen this young man either, she realized. But here, perhaps, he could begin to be visible. On the wall behind the checkout desk hung a simple plaque, the only indication of the building's backstory. It read, Here, everyone has value. People began to enter, silently, with books, with tears. 1 year to the day after Benjamin Foster walked into Miller's diner, Tessa stood in the quiet library that had replaced it, arranging a display of new children's books. The space had evolved over the months. Community members had donated furniture, books, time. What began as a simple lending library had become a gathering place, a refuge. The door chimed. An elderly man entered, well-dressed but not ostentatious, leaning slightly on a cane. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though Tessa was certain they'd never met. Can I help you find something? She asked. I believe you already have. His voice was gentle, cultured. You're Tessa Moore. It wasn't a question. Tessa nodded, suddenly cautious. Though the media frenzy had died down, she occasionally still encountered people who recognized her from the book. My name is Richard Harlow. He extended his hand. I was Benjamin Foster's roommate at Princeton. Benjamin never went to college, Tessa said automatically, remembering the diary. He ran away at 16. Richard smiled sadly. And reinvented himself completely by 20. Few people knew the truth. I was one of them. He reached inside his jacket and removed an envelope, aged and slightly yellowed. Benjamin gave me this 50 years ago, made me promise to deliver it to the person he described as the one who finally sees me. When I read about you, I knew it was time. With trembling fingers, Tessa accepted the envelope. The paper was fragile with age, the handwriting elegant but firm. He wrote this 50 years ago. Benjamin always played the long game. Richard's eyes crinkled. He once told me that true change requires patience. After the man left, Tessa sat alone in the reading alcove, carefully opening the delicate envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, dated the day after their meeting in the diner. To the person who served me coffee with kindness. By now, you know my story. The boy born in shadow who built an empire of light. You know about Claire, about the Fosters, about the truth I kept hidden for so long. What you don't know is that my life has been a 50-year experiment in understanding value. What makes a person valuable? Is it money, power, birth? None of these answers satisfied me. Then you served me coffee. You looked at me, truly looked, when I was disguised as the thing society values least. You saw a human being worthy of dignity. In that moment, I knew I had found the answer I sought for half a century. You served me with your eyes. You saw me with your soul. For 5 minutes I was a king. You haven't inherited my money. You've inherited my purpose, to make the invisible seen, to recognize value where others see nothing. This is worth more than billions. This is worth everything. Benjamin. Tessa pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. After everything, the diary, the recordings, the book, the library, this simple note somehow completed the circle. The following week, James came home from school excited about a writing assignment. My hero. I wrote about you, Mom, he announced proudly. Me? Tessa laughed. I'm no hero. The teacher read it to the whole class, Emma chimed in. Everyone clapped. Can I see it? Tessa asked. James handed her his paper. The title read, My Mother Changed the World Without It Noticing. My mom was a waitress who worked very hard. One day she was kind to someone nobody else saw. She didn't do it to get famous or rich. She just did it because that's who she is. Now she helps people find books and stories in their voices. She taught me that the most important thing isn't what you have, but who you see. That evening, after the children were asleep, Tessa sat on the porch of their modest home, Benjamin's letter in her hands. She thought about how different her life was now. Not wealthy, not famous, but purposeful, connected, meaningful. Inside the house, tucked in a drawer, was Claire Foster's uncashed check for $500,000, the amount she'd offered for the diary months ago. Tessa had nearly torn it up a dozen times, but something had stopped her. Now she knew what to do with it. The following day, she established the Scene Foundation, using Claire's money as seed funding. Its mission? Creating libraries and literacy programs in communities where people felt invisible. The first grant went to the homeless shelter where the young man who'd visited her library that first night was staying. Years passed. The library expanded to 3 locations. The foundation flourished. Claire Foster surprisingly became its largest anonymous donor, though she and Tessa never spoke directly again. One snowy December evening, as Tessa was closing the original library, a young man stumbled in, shivering from the cold. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Just needed to get warm. Bus is late." Tessa recognized the look in his eyes. The same look Benjamin had worn that first day. Invisible. Unseen. She smiled, poured a cup of coffee in the chipped mug, and set it before him. "On the house," she said. "I can pay," he insisted, pride in his voice despite his circumstances. "Next time," she replied, remembering the words she'd spoken years ago. As she placed the mug before him, she added quietly, "Would you like sugar?" He looked up, startled by the simple kindness, the recognition in her eyes. And in that moment, the world began again, with gentleness. Benjamin's true inheritance lived on. Sometimes, a simple act of kindness is more powerful than we realize. Tessa didn't receive money, but she inherited something far greater, the chance to change lives with truth and dignity. In a world that judges by appearances, she chose to see with the heart. And you? What would you have done in her place? What did you feel while watching this story? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like. Comment below what country or city you're watching from. It helps us create even more powerful stories for you. And if you want to keep feeling inspired, click the card on your screen to watch the next story we prepared with the same care. Thank you so much for being here.